Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
Welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind Newsline, Indiana. And we have a very interesting guest this week by the name of Mr. Carlos Taylor. And Carlos Taylor is program manager. And Carlos, now where are you program manager at?
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here with you. My title is program manager of the Gregory S. Ferrybach Center at Eskenazi Health.
And Carlos, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now, Carlos, now what we would like to know is more about you. So tell us, Carlos, where were you born? And just give us a little bit more information about Mr. Young Carlos.
Certainly. Yeah, so I was born in South Bend, Indiana. And I was born sighted, actually. I was actually nearsighted as a child until about the age of 6 when I experienced a detached retina. 2 detached retinas in my left eye first, and then a short time later in my right eye. So at the time, I was attending private school. And once I became blind, I needed some additional services that just simply weren't available at that school at that time. So my parents enrolled me, and we're talking just for time frame, about 1986 or so. So my parents enrolled me in the public school system in South Bend, where I was able to work with a teacher of the visually impaired to learn how to read Braille. I also received orientation and mobility services to learn how to use a cane and how to, navigate throughout my school building and, outside and various surroundings. So I attended public school, from then on, except, during the summers, I did attend the Indiana School for the Blind for summer programs, which were primarily recreational in nature. But I definitely had a solid foundation as a child with education and all the things and skills that I had to learn to adapt to being blind.
Okay, now, were you an only child, Carlos?
So I have an older brother. My brother is roughly about 15 years older than me. So being, that he's older, he was kind of off doing his own thing as a young adult when I was a young child, primarily. So for a large part of growing up, I grew up as an only child. Just, like I said, my brother was older and on his own.
Okay, and Carlos, how was that with you? Basically, like you said, you did have an older brother, much older, and off on his own. And how did that losing your retinas? Just how did that impact your family? And do you recall how it impacted you?
Yeah, so I'm the only person who's blind in my family, so it was something that was something that my family had to adjust to, not knowing anybody else who's blind and what have you. But my family was very resourceful. I think they reached out to various people, learning about educational options and enrolling me in the public school system certainly helped. And once I started learning Braille to read Braille, and then a short time later learning how to use talking computers, and then my dad was very instrumental in and getting that for me to use at home, so that I could do my homework and what have you. They were very resourceful and they weren't afraid to ask questions. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it sounds to me that you had a strong family support, and it also sounds like you had a strong educational direction. So, like any other child, I'm just guessing that you had your childhood dreams. And what did you see yourself as, growing up, becoming, growing into, as far as, your professional growth and things like that, Carlos?
Right. So early on, as a young child, much like young children, you see police officers, firefighters, these sorts of things. And that's kind of my earliest memories of what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up. Then as time grew on and, as I learned more about various occupations, I actually was interested in going into the radio broadcasting field. And actually, when I was in high school, I had several opportunities to do some radio broadcasting work, both through my school and through other radio stations in the South Bend area. And when I went off to Ball State University for college, my initial major was telecommunications. But I learned that that's a very competitive field, a very hard field to get into, especially when we're talking in the late 90s. A lot of automation was coming into those radio stations and limiting job opportunities. My other interest was in technology, so I changed my major to be more technology focused and completed my bachelor's degree in business information technology from Ball State University. And then I returned for a master's degree and was called information and communication sciences. So I realized that technology had a lot to offer, not only for me as a person who's blind, but also so many different options as far as careers are concerned.
Okay, and did you run into any barriers during your educational development phase?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, several barriers, too many to mention here. But absolutely, there's challenges. There's challenges, especially when there's information that's graphical in nature. In K-12, a lot of diagrams were, created in tactile form, which was absolutely fantastic to have. In the higher education realm, things are a bit different. Textbooks don't come in Braille by default. I mean, you have to send them off to be transcribed and what have you. So, late 90s, early 2000s, I was working a lot with digital textbooks, scanning my textbooks, or the university scanning my textbooks and what have you. And I was able to get diagrams in a tactile format. It was just a different process. Working with professors, working with disability service providers, and what have you at the university to get the materials that I needed. So it's a lot different, but still able to access what I needed. So yeah, there's challenges for sure.
Well, I know that with those challenges, you have overcome some of the trials and triumphs. And we're going to take a short pause and we're going to come back and talk about what you are doing and continue to do to improve the lives of individuals with disabilities, particularly students and adults, which you empower them and bring them to an economic level of independence. So we'll be right back with Mr. Carlos Taylor. Stay tuned.
I just graduated college as a blind student. How can I independently find job listings?
Thanks to the National Federation of the Blind, visually impaired Hoosiers can hear newspapers, circulars, and magazines from across the globe.
It is a fantastic service.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline, Indiana. And we're speaking with Mr. Carlos Taylor. And again, Carlos, thank you so much for being our guest today. Carlos, you were talking about your upbringing in Ball State University, educational path. And tell us a little bit more about you as, let's go back to the student, being a student at Ball State, and how you prepared yourself for your professional growth.
Right. So, I think it helped me, being in high school, middle school, what have you. I was in mainstream classes. I was not in a special education classroom all day long. Now, I did work with a teacher of the visually impaired, for getting my materials that I needed in an accessible format, taking exams, et cetera, but the majority of my day in high school, middle school, and elementary school was spent in a classroom with sighted children. So I think that helped me because, as I went on to college, I knew that things weren't automatically going to be accessible to me. I had to advocate, to get materials in an accessible form. So that, along with learning, orientation, and mobility. So I feel that my mobility skills helped me to transition to, a college campus where you're going to various buildings, various rooms. So a lot to learn in the beginning, but having that independence to go to various parts of campus whenever you need to go was very empowering for me. Also, my early experience with computer technology helped me because when I went to college, I already knew how to use a computer in general. It was just a matter of learning the specifics as far as, okay, this is Ball State's email system. I had email at home, so I knew what the concept of email was. So it was just, so the learning curves, although there was a lot to learn, it wasn't as if I was unfamiliar with all these things altogether, screen readers, Braille note-taking devices, all these different pieces of technology that I used to get through school. And then, being a blind child in a classroom of sighted children in high school and what have you, I learned to keep an open dialogue with my teachers as to what was going on and what have you. And so that helped, when I got to college, because, it's important to keep keeping an open dialogue with your professors so that, any challenges that you come across as a blind student that they're not aware of, that you let them know so that they can be aware and help you work through some of the challenges that you encounter. So those are a lot of things that prepared me to transition to college. So I really enjoyed my time in college. I lived on campus. I was involved in various things. I played goal ball, which is a sport for individuals who are blind. I did some work as a student in what was called the Adaptive Computer Technology Lab. And so I started working there as a freshman, second semester freshman, when I was a lab assistant, assisting other students who came into the lab who needed help, accessing the assistive technology there. I had a lot of different experiences getting involved in various programs, National Residence Hall Honorary, my Hall Council. I was vice president and president for a time for Hall Council. So I was very involved in several things outside of the classroom.
That is so credible of you, because I was just wondering, being at Ball State University in the great city of Muncie, Indiana, I just was wondering, how many students was there, or did you know of how many students were blind or visually impaired as you pursued your 4 years through Ball State?
Yeah, so the number, of course, fluctuated from year to year, but roughly, as far as blind students at the time, maybe 7, 8, roughly. Another 10, 20 students with low vision that I knew of anyway. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to challenge my inner being here, and I'm going to take it way back to when I was maybe a young adult and getting ready to go to college. And I just wonder.
Way back.
So, I just wonder. Okay, I just wonder, what I would be challenged with, as you were talking about, and how I would be accepted by being in such a large minority. Did you have those types of questions in your mind or curiosities as to how you would be accepted in the sighted world at a university like Ball State?
Oh, absolutely. Although I had good experiences that helped me transition to college, this was all new to me. I'm moving from South Bend, Indiana to Muncie to attend school, about 2.5 hour drive away, so I'm off on my own for the first time, without my mom and dad, there daily, so a lot of things were new, and, just wondering how do people do this? How do people do that? So I had met some other blind students who were really helpful to me. I was asked them questions about how they did certain things, how they approached certain situations. So that was really helpful to have that camaraderie. But, it turned out I had a very, very good first year. And I think that helped throughout my college career.
Well, Carlos, I can figure it out for you. They think that blindness is going to jump off of you and onto them.
Right.
That's some of those preconceived ideas, so
right.
We all have to deal with them. Florence, you had a question before we go to break?
No, we can go on the break, and then I'll just direct the question when we get back.
Okay, well, we're going to take us a short pause, and we'll be right back with Florence's question to Mr. Carlos Taylor. Stay tuned.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read Jerusalem Post too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline, Indiana. And again, we're speaking with Carlos Taylor. And Carlos, as far as your being a student at Ball State University, did you take advantage of the career services that were there?
I did, absolutely. So the Career Center, they did a lot. They had a lot of programs for students to attend, to learn about resumes, interviews, and then they have people in the Career Center who can help people review their resumes, give you tips on how to improve your resume, and practice interviews and what have you. So I did take advantage of those services, those programs that were offered, those presentations. I just wanted to learn all that I could to help me prepare for the time when I would, be, come to the point where I would be seeking employment myself.
So now that you have completed your education and you have sought employment, tell us a little bit some of the difficulties with transitioning to employment, not from maybe, your perspective, but employers' perspectives of you.
Right. So in general, and the pandemic is changing this a little, but transportation for anybody who has a disability, whether they're blind or they have any other type of disability that makes driving something that would not be an option. Transportation. And accessible housing, where do you live in relation to your employer, and can you get to and from work? I mean, that's a major concern. Of course, the interview, and there's always, I mean, you could have a whole show on when you disclose your disability before the interview or not, and people have different philosophies on that. I have my own. So there's that challenge before you even get to the employment. Once you're offered a position and you get into the door, so to speak, then it's, okay, what's accessible? What's not accessible? Whatever is not accessible, how can we work around these barriers, these walls, so that I can be a productive employee and do my job? So those challenges exist for a lot of people. And then just educating the employer. Okay, things may be perfectly accessible today, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stay accessible. So as things change within the employment environment, whether it's the physical environment or the technology that they choose to use, educating the employer so that they know the things that you're working with as far as things you need to be accessible so that you can effectively do your job. So those are just some of the challenges. There's many more, but those are some of the challenges that people face when it comes to employment.
Okay, and may I ask you your take on when do you believe that it's best to let an employer know of your disability?
That's a great question. So for me, I don't mention in my cover letter. Yes, we do have some laws that prohibit discrimination against people with disabilities when it comes to employment, but it's very, very difficult to prove that the reason you didn't get a job is because of your disability. So for me, I don't mention in my cover letter. I just focus on my skills and how I am qualified for the position that I'm applying for. If I have a phone interview, again, I focus on those skills. When it comes to the in-person interview, that's when I would say, okay, I am happy, I'm honored to come in for an interview. I would just like to let you know that, I am blind, et cetera, et cetera. And then I can ask any questions I might need as far as the location of the interview, any other questions I may need to ask ahead of time so that nobody's surprised when I walk into the room, but, they've already looked at my qualifications ahead of time without thinking about, my blindness. So that's my approach.
And real quick, Carlos, as you are doing today, you're working, and tell us a little bit about your work and the internship programs. And we got about a minute left.
Okay, so what we do at the Gregory S. Ferrybach Center is we provide internship opportunities to college students all over the state of Indiana. Doesn't matter what school you're attending, as long as you have a physical disability, meaning a hearing, vision, or mobility impairment. And we work to provide internship opportunities related to a student's major, whatever that student is studying in school. And we provide accommodations for those who don't live in the Indianapolis area. We'll provide housing, we'll provide transportation. These internships are paid experiences. So you do get paid during your internship. And we have several employer partners with the center. So a lot of our interns do work at Eskenazi Health in the various departments. It's not just healthcare related. And, you have business affairs, public affairs and communications, information technology. There's so many different areas within Eskenazi Health, but we also have employer partners that work with us. Eli Lilly, Indianapolis Children's Museum, just to name a couple, the Idle George Museum, so many different ones around the Indianapolis area that work with us that we place interns and roles at those companies and organizations as well. So yes, if you qualify, please reach out. May I leave my email address?
Yes, sir. It'll be scrolled across the screen as well.
It's Carlos, Carlos .Taylor, Taylor at Eskenazi Health. That's spelled ESKENAZI Health, HEALTH.edu. So Carlos.Taylor at eskenazihealth.edu. And once again, Eskenazi is spelled ESKEN as in Nancy, AZI.
Okay, well, we're going to come back with the conclusion of this show, and stay tuned.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
Welcome back to the conclusion of our show. And Carlos, do you have a message, an inspirational message to leave with our viewing audience today?
Yes, being that this is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, I would like to leave those who are seeking employment, particularly those with a disability who are seeking employment, to not give up. Keep trying, keep your options open. Networking is a very important skill, so make sure you network with people and find out about opportunities that may exist. So I know it can be a discouraging process, but it's well worth it in the end. So yeah, keep your head high and don't give up.
So everyone, there you have heard it from Mr. Carlos Taylor. Carlos, thank you once again for joining us. And we look forward to having you back sometime relatively soon. So listening and viewing audience, take good care of yourselves and stay safe.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org. or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.